or have another print disability which makes reading, holding a book, or turning a page difficult or impossible. The content is copyrighted by the respective publishers. For more information, please visit us on the web at nfradioreading.org.
Hello, this is Harriet Gromer Hicks, and for the next hour, I'll be reading from the March 22nd, 2026 issue of the New York Times Arts and Leisure section on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Our first article is His Business is Empathy. It's Blooming. John Lithgow's career spans 200 roles from smaller parts to the new giant in which he portrays Raoul Dial. One of the privileges of being a very famous and extremely genial actor is that you might find yourself as John Lithgow did at 9:30 on a recent Wednesday morning, being welcomed to Metropolitan Museum of Arts on the one day a week it is closed to visitors. Susan Allison Stein, the Met's curator of 19th century European painting, was walking him privately through the small but astonishing Helen Skrzybek exhibition, which includes a series of self-portraits made over the course of 60 years that could rip your heart out with their unsparing, duplicitous, and style, rage, delight, and deceptitude. Lithgow, who has lately dwindled from a 6'4" to 6'3", but maintains a big man's big personality, bubbled with interest as he loped from canvas to canvas. A collector of art and also of curators, he occasionally asked Stein, who has led him on many such tours, about the painter's biography and method and world. I wondered if he was making mental notes on how character arises from circumstance to produce as he has produced so many extremes of feeling. But later he told me that while certainly noticing Skrzybek's combination of great technique and deeply felt emotion, he was mostly thinking wistfully about the art he might have made if he'd chosen that life and been good enough. He's undoubtedly good, as he is a quick guided tour of his phone's photo gallery demonstrated. For years he has drawn or painted his co-stars and castmates, presenting their portraits as gifts, but artist is just another of the roles he has doomed and discarded since first tottering onto the stage at age 2. Now 80, having performed on Broadway and television since 1973 and on film starting a few years later, he finds himself starting a few years later approaching what he describes as the end of his career by reaching as far afield as possible, which is saying something for a man who has played to skim a list stretching toward 200 roles: King Lear, Lord Farquaad, Liz Lazardo, and Trinity Killer, Winston Churchill twice, Riddle Mutson, Bill Clinton, J.J. Hunsaker, and a sex bamboos diplomat, a dance-banning reverend, a corrupt cardinal, and an alien Dick Solomon. That last role, which he performed for 6 seasons, started in 1996 on the sitcom Third Rock from the Sun, may be the one he's still most famous for 30 years later. As he left the Met, a guard shyly stopped him to say how much he loved him on the show. He loved the show too, he told me, for offering the chance to create the kind of outrageous character he can hardly imagine himself playing, but that other people can't imagine being played by anybody else. Yet when you've acted your way to the end of every available limb, where do you go next? Especially when the world in which you learn to love performing, a world that valorized actors who could play anyone and everyone, has changed so radically. Many of the roles Lithgow most treasures are exactly the ones some people would now say that he, a pretty ordinary cisgender straight guy, should never be cast in. His sensitive Oscar-nominated portrayal of Muldoon, the transgender former football player in The World According to Garp, would surely go to a trans actor today. And though he remains proud to have had the chance to turn his inhibition of her into drama that deeply moves people and broadens their sensibilities, he accepts that. Still, he keeps pushing himself towards contradiction, difference, and even reputational danger as his choices invite criticism to the Australian film Jimpa, available digitally next week. He plays the gay grandfather of a transgen grandchild, yet as Dumbledore, also gay, in the upcoming television version of Harry Potter books. He has associated himself, outright indirectly, with the author J.K. Rowling, whose social media comments over the years have been seen by many as transphobic. The play giant, now in previews on Broadway, ties that Lithgow Van Not even tighter. He stars in as Roald Dahl, another hugely successful and device children's book author. This is one of his hair-raisingly anti-Semitic. Why, with nothing left to prove, does he make such a beeline for such potentiality, divisive gigs? I am fascinated by every variety of human experience and want to understand it, he said. I'm in the empathy business. The 2-year-old Lithgow would have been too young to notice that his stage debut in 1947 established the pattern. In drama, his 2011 memoir, he writes that the play he appeared in was vaguely Japanese adaptation of The Emperor's New Clothes, which someone drew dark diagonal eyebrows on his face in an attempt then to comment the theater, but now understood as racist, to suggest that he was Asian. 10 years later, when his Scout Camp performance as Dismal in Distress was met with ear-splitting laughter. My fate was probably sealed, he adds. No accident that his book's subtitle is An Actor's Education. He learned from such experiences to be the kind of performer who found his power playing anyone but himself. The idea of versatility as virtue was in the air of upbringing, much of which took place on stage. His was a theatrical family in both senses. His father established and ran a series of classical repertory companies whose precipitous closures led to Joad-like relocations. At one point, like an army brat, but the Shakespeare and Ibsen in his resume, Lithgow attended 3 schools in 2 states in 1 year. That's how he became what he calls a pleaser, someone who to this day memorizes immediately everyone's names on every new job, including the many children on Harry Potter shoot, noting that Francisca Gardner, the series showrunner, called him a great human. Sophia Hyde, the director of Jimpa, said charm and lovability ooze out of him. Nicholas Heitner, the director of Giant, offered the itemization, phenomenal warmth, sympathy, enthusiasm, openness. Little do they know, Lithgow said, he is very hard on himself. Drama sometimes reads like a public self-flogging. Unlike his father, whom he resembles in superficial ways, tall, plummy voice, twinkly, encyclopedic, he says he possesses the son of a bitch chromosome you need to survive in the theater. That's not the same as ruthlessness, though. When retelling a story about his kindness at age 13 to an outcast girl who tried to befriend him, he started to cry. Even now it pains me, he said. That's just too old to be so vile. Well, maybe not yet too old. In his early 20s, to evade the Vietnam draft, he played the role of John Lithgow for his examiners, painting himself as an unscrutable psychological basket case. When asked if he was gay, which would bar him from serving, he said he often thought about his college roommate. The performance, he writes, was a triumph, though it left him feeling deeply ashamed. So did almost the entirety of his busy 1970s, when he says he slept with actresses in 8 of the 20 plays he performed in, culminating in an affair with Liv Ullmann that broke up with his first marriage. His second, to Mary Yeager, a now retired professor of economic and business history, has lasted ever since. Still, the misbehavior of his youth eventually taught him 2 important lessons. Good people are people capable of bad things, he told me. And more problematically, bad people are capable of good. Which of those lessons is dominant in Giant is the kind of conundrum Lithgow loves to explore. The play by Mark Rosenblatt drops the audience into the fictional 1983 lunch meeting in which Dahl, the beloved author of a children's classic including Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, Matilda, the BFG, faces down representatives of London and New York publishers. The true power is that Dahl has just reviewed a book about the 1982 Israeli invasion of Lebanon, which sought to halt years of rocket attacks by Palestine Liberation Organization and resulted in the deaths of thousands of Lebanese civilians. The line between anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism, let alone mere disapproval of Israel government's actions, is prenatally blurry and at the moment electrified. But Dahl's review stepped definitely, almost gleefully, over it when his representative begged him to issue a retraction, not least because his book, The Witches, is imminently to be published. He instead doubles down on his hatred of Jews. The play incorporates verbatim statements like this one from a 1990 interview with a New Statesman. Even a stinker like Hitler didn't just pick on them for no reason. Does it frighten him? I asked Lithgow. 7 of Mesiel's Incipitals. Lithgow further complicates the character just by being Lithgow. His genius for instantly putting an audience at ease is heightenedly putting, as Heitner, the director, described it, allows him to use his charm and wit and mischief to make the violence of Dahl's prejudice and cruelty all the more powerful. Turning his moral disasters into acting triumph, Lithgow won the 2025 Oliver Award for the role in London, is as in old Shakespeare. The aims of drama are not the same as those of justice or civility. When I asked Heitner whether Lithgow's performance might force to accept that a monster could write a masterpiece and that the two things are unrelated, he simply said good. He meant that people and art and even countries being complex should be dealt with complexly. Theater should model, not avoid, that approach. It is in that light that Lithgow sees his appearance of the Potter series, which HBO plans to run for 7 seasons over the course of a decade, starting in 2027. He has never met Rowling. Does he agree with her views on transgender issues? And the story itself is clearly on the side of Angels Against Intolerance and Bigotry. He said, moreover, he feels that his performances in Garp and Jimpa and his half of an older gay couple in the 2014 film Love is Strange should be an expression of his interest in queer culture, not heedless. I'm sorry, I lost my where I was. I'm going to just start again. It is in that light that Lithgow sees his appearance in the Potter series, which HBO plans to run for 7 seasons over the course of a decade, starting in 2027. He has never met Rowling, nor does he agree with her views on transgender issues. And the story itself is clearly on the side of Angels Against Intolerance and Bigotry. He said, moreover, he feels that his performance in Garp and Jimpa and as half of an older gay couple in 2014 film is Strange should be seen as expressions of his interest in queer culture, not as heedless appropriations of it. He assumed his loyalties were clear. Certainly he jumped headfirst and at one point fully naked except for a leather harness into Jimpa, which Hyde, the director, said a number of gay actors had turned down. Though his character is resistant to the newfangled terminology of his trans grandchild, he calls the teenager his grandthing. Their mutual love is obvious. The same applied to Lithgow's interactions with the mostly queer cast and crew. In an interview with Out Magazine, Odd Mason Hyde, who plays the grandchild and, like the character is trans, called him such a beautiful human to make work with. But Mason Hyde found Lithgow's decision to join the Potter series disconcerting, telling Out there's an element of this that feels vaguely hurtful. The social media reaction has been far less gentle, with some posts expressing outrage and encouraging boycotts. Stung, Lithgow considered quitting the series but decided not to, and accepts without rancor that in every interview I will ever do the rest of my life this will come up. Whether actors inherit the moral onus of authors is now vexed question. Sophie Hyde, the Jimpa director, as well as Mason Hyde's mother, told me that despite her feelings about Rowling, she appreciates that Lithgow is an adult and has a right to make his artistic choice. John's work comes from a place of deep empathy and humanity. That bigger political conversation is not one he's engaging in. As for the blowback, she added, sometimes you have to think about who you're working with and for not who you're working against. Surely there's no question where Lithgow stands political. He's written 3 books of light verse excoriating Donald Trump. The second, Trumpety Dumpety Wanted a Crown, published in 2020, includes couplets like this one. He wanted a robe made of ermine and velvet. The Constitution, he wanted to shelve it. Such polemics he leaves on the page. The stage and the screen are not for certainties, but rather, he says, for the little nooks and crannies between them, and also for redemption. When I asked if even Dahl is worthy of that, Lithgow thought finally as unsparing as those Skrebejek self-portraits used his best oracular tones to answer with what sounded like awe and hope. Yes, everybody is. You're listening to a reading of articles and features from the New York Times Arts and Leisure section on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Our next article is Striking Moves That Blur the Boundaries. A mix of live performance and digital comes to the Paris Opera. The Paris Opera ballet dancers stood waiting for their cue as film played above them. On screen, a man swirled and dipped as white fabric eddied dizzyingly around his body. Then the fabric disappeared. Lights flickered and he walked off the screen and into the rehearsal space at the Opera Bastille, a camerawoman filming him as he joined the dancers on stage, now moving sharply to a propulsive rhythm. Does everyone know where they are? Morgan Runeke Temple called out as her choreographer Jessica Wright counted out the music in a mix of French and English. It can be hard to know where you are or what you are watching in a work by Wright, 42, and Ranker Temple, 43, who were rehearsing Arena, their new piece for the Paris Opera Ballet, which opened on March 11th alongside a new work by Marcos Moreau on a double bill called Empreintes or Impressions. Using real-time video recorded footage and live performance, the 2 women, known collectively as Jess and Morgs, are creators of weird and wonderful works that blur the boundaries between live performance and digital. You have to look twice to see who's real, wrote Zoe Anderson in The Independent of the ballet Hotel created for Birmingham Royal Ballet in 2022. Film is also intimate and visceral and can give an audience access to these thoughts and ideas that might be in a dancer's mind. Wright said in a video interview a week or so before the premiere of Arena, "I find that thrilling." The pair first made a name for themselves in their native Britain as the creators of witty, surreally ingenious dance films. In 2022, they garnered mainstream attention with their clever, sharp take on Coppola for Scottish Ballet, snappily updating version of the story of the depicted toy maker, Dr. Coppolus, as an Elon Musk-like inventor using artificial intelligence to transform Coppola, here an aviator rather than a doll, into a perfect human. After Coppola, the Paris Opera was quickest off the mark in giving Jess and Morg their first major international commission, a big league prospect that hadn't crossed their minds. "We were very surprised," Runke Temple said. "We are still surprised." Jose Martinez, the director of the Paris Opera Ballet, said he had been impressed by Curing Albrecht, a short film Jess and Morgs made for English National Ballet in 2016 as a curtain raiser to Akram Khan's Giselle. It's a really real play between film and dance, an amazing setting of an old swimming pool with a clever take on the original ballet, Martinez said in a phone interview. It had such highly cinematic imagery, but kept choreography at a forefront. Martinez said he didn't ask Ranker Temple and Wright to use film when he invited them to create a work for opera in early 2024. I left it very open, he said. What's interesting is for them to have dialogue with the dancers and the house. Pairing film and dance on stage isn't new, but Ranker Temple and Wright mentioned the influence of Hans van Manen's 1979 Live, which juxtaposes a dancer and her real-time film image and many choreographers. Merce Cunningham, Lucinda Childs, William Forsythe, and Benjamin Millepied, among them, have used film on stage to pointed effect. But creatively experimental use of the film remains relatively rare in dance, unlike on the theater and opera stages, where video projection and the intersection of virtual and live representation is common. Ballet companies did put things on screen, but it was always decorative or a film of a stage production, said Christopher Hampson, the director of the Scottish Ballet, who first commissioned Jess and Morgs to create Tremble in 2019. What stuck out with them was that wonderful disruptors they were to this usual way of working. Ranker Temple and Wright met as teenagers in 2000 at the Central School of Ballet in London and promptly became best friends. But they didn't start working together in 2025, when both were unemployed graduates waiting for a bus on a hot summer's night. It was very random, intuitive, and playful, said Wright, who was the valuable foil for Ranker Temple's thoughtful quietness in the interview. One of us had a Nokia, one of the better camera phones at the time, and we started playing with scale. They began making little sketches. Ranker Temple said Jess would say, "What if you stood here and my finger seemed to prod you and you fell that way?" We are unemployed with a long summer ahead, and we started taking it very seriously. After friends suggested they enter a short film competition, we were suddenly crunching carrots into computers for sound effects. Wright said their film, Out of Hand, won a prize, and over the next few years, as both women danced and worked in different places, they continued to meet and collaborate on short films. Wright danced mostly with company Wayne Greger, Ranker Temple with a variety of dance makers before turning to choreography. A turning point, Ranker Temple said, was meeting the filmmaker Margaret Williams, who taught them that the camera could be used to guide the viewer's eye, not simply as a theatrical framing device. In live dance, it's a wide shot all the time, Wright said. We become interested in edits, creating very precisely achieved illusions, seeing how you can make something physically impossible appear possible. Several films and numerous festival prizes later, they began a collaboration of English National Ballet, Creating the Last Resort, 2016, Curing Albright, 2016, and Tremble, 2019, which The Guardian described as involving frenetically dancing waiters, red jelly, and thrillish edge. For Albrecht, they worked with a large cast and a professional cinematographer for the first time, and it was breakthrough for them. Ranker Temple said both in terms of exposure and creative growth, we could think about the counterpoint between camera and body and relationship between space and movement. In Tremble, Wright added they began to explore the direct relationship between the performer and the camera and the idea of a transformation of identity. The thought, she said, was how can the camera instigate the action and affect the dancer? They began to use the camera differently, Ranker Temple said, with overhead shots, changing perspectives, and sudden cuts, camera work as a choreography. Their growing film experience fed into Coppola, in which they used live cameras for the first time on stage with a dancer as a cameraman. A successful stride into ballet's future, Lindsay Winship wrote in The Guardian. Ranker Temple said the starting point for Arena, which is to set the commission score by Mikkel Carlson and his decor by Sammy Fendel, collaborators from Coppola, as was the relationship between onstage camera and the dancer. We had been mostly working with narrative, and we wanted to approach this in a more movement-led and experiential way and not anchor ourselves in a concrete time and place, she said. Nonetheless, some themes emerged. Audition competition, the idea that one person would be selected and that could signify celebrity fame, riches status, was the way the dancer Luc Mercal Doulard described Arena. He was cast as number 81, the winner of an unspecified competition. Arena, Mercal Doulard said, was challenging. There are classical as well as contemporary elements, all to which very quick, precise music. You also need to be emotionally present, precise with your gaze and angles of your body because the camera is showing you up close. But you are also dancing for a public who can choose whether to look at you on stage or on screen. It's a lot to think about. Caroline Ozma, number 81, in alternate cast, said the choreographer's rehearsal method felt strange at first. They each worked separately with a group, she said, and then cross over and bring their own touch. And they each have a choreographic identity. Morgan is more grounded, more contemporary, Jess more balletic. But it comes together in rapid, explosive, and energetic movement. There is a lot of speed in the work, and it's almost overwhelming in the solo for 81, she added. Sometimes I feel I am in the Hunger Games. Two cameras manipulated by a dancer and camerawoman are explicitly present, Wright said. It's not a documentary. The camera's eye is not invisible, she said. The dancers are performing for the camera, seeing representations of themselves. We watch them watching themselves. The echo chamber of representation is one we are all familiar with within our daily lives, she added. Anyone can be an influencer, and we are all self-publishing and documenting ourselves continuously. She added that their work had always addressed ideas about versions of the self, what is the real self, When to whom are we visible? She said, adding, images take on a life of their own that you can't always control. Sometimes there is no screen image in arena, Ranker Temple added. We are always asking ourselves why we are using a camera in this or that moment, she said. The reason must be that it will show the audience something they can't otherwise see. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the New York Times Arts and Leisure section on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Our next article is in television. Michelle Pfeiffer is still reinventing herself. At 67, she has 2 new shows, an evolving approach. Santa Monica, California. Imagine that you are born sun-kissed California blonde. As a teenage checkout girl, you decide to become an actress. You know no one in the entertainment industry, so you enter a beauty contest to catch your agent's eyes. You win. Within a year, you're on TV, in soap commercials, and bombshell roles. That's your character's name on one show. The bombshell, you call her Barbara. The movies come, bad ones, better ones. There are $1 million paychecks, magazine covers, award nominations. You step away for years at a time to care for your young family. A decade goes by, then 2. You are a grandmother now, but still beloved, still desired. And the roles, the ones you choose with care, are still rich. Now you can relax, confident in your talent, your success. Unless you are Michelle Pfeiffer, at 67, she is busier than ever, a movie queen lately reinvented as a small screen star. She is also as unsettled as ever about her relationship to her work and how she goes about it. Pfeiffer has not participated substantially in an ongoing series since 1970s, but this spring she has 2, Madison, a lachrymose Taylor Sheridan drama on Paramount Plus, and Margot's Got Money Troubles, a screwy, sweet-hearted dramedy that debuts on April 15 on Apple TV. Both showcase an actress in expert command of her powers. Both prompted her typical unease. Work has been such a gift and got me through so many things. I'm just better busy. I always go into a part with some trepidation because I never quite know how I'm going to go about it, she said over lunch. She sounded mildly regretful. I'd love to be able to skate through some of these things. Skating is not on her repertoire. That's why she is an actress she is, said Christina Alexandra Veros, who directed all of the Madison. She has never sat back in any role in her career. Nearly 5 decades into her career, Pfeiffer is trying faultlessly to learn different habits, to let go a little more, to vanish into her roles a little less, to resist an inclination to obsess. That's not healthy, she said, but that is all she has ever known. She seemed sincere in her desire to ease up on her perfectionism and unsure of the actress and the person she would be without it. But Pfeiffer, on a cloudless February day at an unassuming Santa Monica restaurant, the restaurant's interior was cool and otherwise deserted, which meant she could enjoy the relative anonymity she prefers. It had taken my eyes a little while to adjust to the Demis and longer to adjust to Pfeiffer, who has the kind of prettiness that makes a person dazed and squinty. I might as well have gone back outside and started up at the sun. Pfeiffer has never been comfortable in trading on her beauty. She isn't comfortable with press either. She tolerates interviews better than she used to, especially those for her fragrance company, Henry Rose. But talking about her work to a stranger is a very mild form of torture. It's emotionally, she said. I start to feel anxious about it, the exposure. During the meal, she has never less than gracious, sharing her vegetable sides, answering questions with what felt like real honesty. She is also palpably shy. I felt protective of her, even as I was aware that a star like her, a star who has played Catwoman, does not need protecting. I'd never sat across from someone in whom such strength and such fragility collided. If beauty inconstable, unless you are Pfeiffer, who has described her face as duck-like, explains some of the fascination she exerts on screen. Even more compelling is the emotive tension she brings to many of her characters who feel deeply even as they try to protect and withhold those feelings. Acting began early for her. As a child in what she called an unpredictable household, she play acted her personality, behaving in ways she thought would keep her safe. In many of her best performances in The Dangerous Liaisons, 1988, or The Fabulous Baker Boys, 1989, say there was a child's watchfulness layered underneath a child's fear of hurt. Her attitude toward her work has always been a dance approach and avoidance. After those early bombshell years, she was vigilant about the parts she took. An agent nicknamed her Dr. No. By the 2000s, married to the prolific writer and producer David E. Keeley and a mother of 2 young children, she became even more careful, declining offers that would disrupt family life. She loved motherhood and was grateful for how it blunted her tendency to obsess over her work. It forces you out of narcissism, she said. I was a much happier person when I became a mom. Once both children were in college, she returned more fully to acting. The offers had been there before, but many were unappealing. Evil stepmother or parts that just felt demeaning to women, she said. Now there were a few that felt better. In 2017, she took her first major TV role in decades as Ruth Madoff, the wife of convicted financial scammer Bernie Madoff, in the HBO film The Wizard of Lies. Several movies quickly followed. Why return at all when she had such mixed feelings about the industry and how it treated women, particularly older women? Because even as motherhood has been a respite from work, work had been a respite too, from the preoccupations of an overactive mind. It has been such a gift and got me through so many things, she said. I'm just better busy. She is very busy now, particularly in the Madison, which Sheridan wrote for her. I needed a woman with real internal strength as well as a very deep emotional well, Sheridan wrote in an email. Pfeiffer had that. Pfeiffer plays Stacy Clyburn, the matriarch of wealthy Manhattan clan who decamps to Montana after personal tragedy. Both Pfeiffer and Stacy are self-described city mice and both benefit from long, loving marriages. But Pfeiffer had trouble with the part. She often begins by finding a thread of something in her own life that she can connect to the character, with the pampered Stacy who learns self-sufficiency while wearing silk pajamas. She struggled to find that string. Was she really struggling, or was this her perfectionism talking. Certainly some co-stars observed greater ease. Beau Garrett and Ellie Chapman, who play Stacy's daughters, marveled at Pfeiffer's naturalness in character and sureness on set. She has a gravitas to her, Garrett said. People just quiet down when she's around. She added that it was a privilege to be yelled at by Pfeiffer in family scenes. This was echoed by Chapman. She has a gaze that can completely level you, she said admiringly. But the naturalness doesn't come naturally, or at least not entirely. Kurt Russell, who plays Stacy's husband, previously worked with Pfeiffer on the Du Bois 1988 thriller Tequila Sunrise. It looks effortless, but it's not at all effortless, he said in an interview. Sheridan also saw the cost. I honestly don't know how Michelle was able to access that level of emotion, take after take, and day after day, he said. An actor of her talent and skill could have easily pulled any number of tricks out of her basket, but she didn't. Not once. She forced herself to embrace the suffering. The Madison shot 2 6-episode seasons, about a year apart. In between, Pfeiffer shot the first season of Margot's Got Money Troubles, based on a celebrated Ruthie Thorpe novel. The show is about a young woman, Margot L.A. Fanning, who becomes unexpectedly pregnant and then supports herself as a cam girl. Pfeiffer plays Jane Margot's mother, a former Hooters waitress, now engaged to a youth minister. Keeley created the series. It is Pfeiffer's first meaningful collaboration with him since she played a part in the 1996 film To Gillian in her 37th birthday. This was by choice. When they were first married in 1993, appearing in a TV series, Keeley's typical domain would have been a career embarrassment. Besides, Pfeiffer said, when I come home from work and I've had a bad day, I want him to be on my side. I want him to believe my version that trumped co-working. But television is no longer the calm down it used to be. And when Keeley read the novel, he knew that for Cheyenne, he needed an actress who could be both deceptible and lovable, who could credibly say a line like, I'm just terrible at everything except being pretty, who could command sympathy even as she replied it. I really just couldn't see anyone else but her playing Cheyenne, Keeley said in an interview. In the book, Cheyenne appears only briefly, so Pfeiffer agreed, not knowing that the role would be expanded to include scenes of department store humiliation and bachelorette party hijinks. If she wrestled with Stacy's elegance on the Madison, Cheyenne's pleather and grit were closer to hand. Pfeiffer, who grew up on Orange County, not far from where Cheyenne lives, had known plenty of people like her strivers who were dealt lousy hands and played them the best way they could. It didn't take a lot for me to step into those shoes, Pfeiffer said. Fanning, who first worked with Pfeiffer on the 2001 Whippy I Am Sam, marveled at the astounding balance of fight and vulnerability that Pfeiffer brought to the role, as well as a gift of spontaneity. When you watch Michelle, you never know which way she's going to play it, Fanning wrote in an email. Pfeiffer feels good about these recent shows as good as she allows herself to feel, at least, and Keeley confirmed that so far their marriage has survived. She has always disappeared into her roles, but this time, because she was going back and forth between projects and taking time out to visit her husband and her daughter and granddaughter, she could do her usual vanishing act. She doesn't think the work has suffered. If you're going to survive, you're going to have to figure out a way to do this and enjoy your life and not disappear, she said. She sounded confident. This was toward the end of the interview, and she had exposed herself enough. A few minutes later, she slipped away into the restaurant shadows and then back out into the sun. Our next article, they said bye-bye to a boy band. Harry Styles has released a work of pleasantly breezy, mildly rackish pop, kiss all the time, disco occasionally, a collection of songs that consider sensuous entanglements and doomed relationships, often with beats and bliss lines that beckon the listener to the dance floor. Its lived in a maturity suggests how far has come since the days of the boy band One Direction. Leaving a group of fly solo can be risky, especially when the artist is trying to establish himself as an adult who has moved beyond his teen pop past. In our Styles album, I've compiled a collection of tunes by former boy band members who found success on their own. Harry Styles' American Girls. One of my favorite songs on Kiss All the Time, Disco Occasionally, is its wistful, lightly melancholic second single on which Styles opines a mixture of admiration and envy. My friends are in love with American Girls. It's almost likely go over big with titular demographic. 2. Michael Jackson, Don't Stop Till You Get Enough. The youngest and most successful brother to break out of the Jackson 5 came into his own as a solo star in 1979 with his album Off the Wall. Co-produced by Quincy Jones, the LP could have been called Disco All the Time. Number 3, Justin Timberlake featuring Calypso, Like I Love You. When he was 21, the ramen-haired Justin Timberlake stepped out into formation with NSYNC and embarked on a solo career that began with the hit 2002 R&B album Justified. The first single was his fleet-footed Neptunes produced blast Spanish guitar and croon charisma, which garnered major grown-up cred for featuring a verse from the one hot trap duo Calypso. Number 4, Bobby Brown, Every Little Step. The former New Edition member Bobby Brown was only 19 when he released his second solo album, the wildly successful Don't Be Cruel, in 1988. The LP spawned 5 top 10 hits on the Billboard Hot 100. Helped popularize the sound of New Jack Swing, and in the effervescent hits quintessentially 1989 music video introduced the world to the dance known as Roger Rabbit. Number 5, Ricky Martin, Livin' La Vida Loca. Ricky Martin, a one-time member of the Puerto Rican boy band Menudo, set the entire world in fuego with the Spanish Smash. If you were alive in 1999, you may never need to hear it again. And if you weren't, well, you kids know the guy who sang about Hawaii during Brad Bunny's Super Bowl halftime performance. Check out this song from him. listening to a reading of articles and features from the March 22nd, 2026 issue of the New York Times Arts and Leisure sections. Reread from the New York Times Arts and Leisure section every Sunday at 3 p.m. Your reader has been Harriet Gromer Hicks. Thank you and have a great day.
Coming up next in the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service, we have the re-airing of this morning's Buffalo News. Following that at 6 p.m. is the Buffalo News Viewpoints. Stay tuned for this reading and more throughout the day. following program is intended for listeners who are blind, have low vision, or have another print disability,